Welcome back to Green Thumbs Up, the show where everybody's an expert, but nobody has all the answers. And we are live here with Dr. Cary Goodwin. We're talking about spring, which has well and truly
Yay!
sprung. Well, now, not really though, hey, because Spring Day is always celebrated as the first of spring, but the real spring day is spring equinox, which is on the 21st of September. Good morning, Cary. How are you?
Good morning. Very, very good. And yourselves? Can we hear each other now?
Yay, we can hear each other. How
Yay!
absolutely awesome.
Okay,
Thank you, Subanisu in studio, the man with the plan. He really and truly is.
absolutely.
And I was just saying, spring is such a wonderful time. And I'm sat here, as you can see, this is my mom's one of her little garden corners. And it is just all blooming, although this is August. Have a look at those roses. How pretty are they? And so this is the perfect time actually to be here because I get a feeling of what spring is, what's happening in springtime there in Durban. But it's also Arbor Week.
Yes, it is. So I think everything starts happening in September. And my favorite was yesterday, a customer said to me, he couldn't believe how the blossoms in the trees and the leaves just started almost within the week, actually started sprouting. And I'm like, it does feel that way. Like one week there was nothing, and next it's
Yes.
all full of life. And like you were saying earlier, I love it that there's extra hours in the day. Thank goodness for that. I mean, how are we going to achieve everything we need to achieve without the extra sunlight that we're going to
This
have?
is
So,
this is where we have to say a resounding Alhamdulillah. So you talk about things budding where there was nothing there before. I went outside just before I left to come over here, and I looked at my jabuticaba tree. And my jabuticaba tree is the thing that tells me that spring is well and truly on its way, because guess what? It is already starting to blossom. I can see those little blossoms just closed, and one or two of them starting to open up. And it's wonderful. And you see the bees. Have you noticed the bees are a little bit more active, right?
definitely. So, not only are the bees more active, but I actually think I want to say it's a catch 22. If people planted a spring flowering garden, then their gardens are looking magnificent. So they're full of the pansies and the primulas and the violas. As I say, your fruit orchards, all the peaches and nectarines, and those blossoms are starting to open as well. But what made me slightly sad is quite a few people miss the idea of planting a spring garden. And so I feel they're rushing into summer, almost like our weather is doing a little bit, because I hear it's going to get quite super hot this week. And so they really wanted to. And I think one of the lessons that we can always learn about gardening is to appreciate each moment as it comes and to appreciate each blossom,
Yes.
each bloom, because that is going to give us so much joy and happiness. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, when you talk about the bees, the poppies at the moment are looking phenomenal. And they're just
Yes.
buzzing with all the bees that are collecting the pollen and getting more like energized for spring, just like we are. So
Yes. And I mean, out in America, and you're thinking about Alaska, and when it's their springtime, the bears start to wake up, and the animals start to come out of hibernation. I don't know if we have animals in South Africa that come out of hibernation. Do we have any hibernating animals? I don't know.
I
I
was going to say
wonder.
not so much, but we have a big fish pond at one of our branches. And
Yes.
just before winter, I actually went and took the nets off because we put nets over to protect our fish from the giant kingfisher that used to come hunting there. And then I was a little bit tired of the nets, and so we took all the nets off. And then my team said to me, "Look, the birds are back and they're eating all the fish," because we had the heron come to visit us and the giant kingfisher. And so then I said, well, we're not putting the nets back on. We're going to just leave it for winter. But now we can see that the fish actually weren't eaten by all the birds. They were hibernating under our water poppies and our water lilies and the water plants that were in the fish pond. They were actually hibernating. So even when we tried to splash and feed them, they didn't come out of their resting place. They were conserving their energy. So I never really thought fish would
Yeah.
hibernate, but this
Yeah.
year they taught me something new.
Fish definitely slow down in the winter times, but they slow down and they do climb under those leaves. I remember I used to have quite a big fish pond many years back, and I always wondered, where did all the fish go? And then before you see the big mama fishes, if you can call them that, you see these little tiny little things. They look like mosquitoes under the water. And you know, it is spring because the fish are out. And another thing I didn't know about fish, I did not know that fish, I mean, I always wondered, what on earth do fish eat? And I thought it maybe it's just plankton. They actually nibble on those little pond plants. They nibble on the ponds in the plant, the plants in the pond. Where there's no, well, my words are getting twistilated. It must be springtime. So we've got the bees going, which means we need the bees for pollination. So this is the time for the bees to come out. We've got the other pollinators coming out though too, and that is the wasps that start to come out at this time, because they are strong pollinators, and people seem to think that wasps are pests, but they aren't really. They are actually pollinators.
Well, I think we should
So
be appreciating, oh, sorry,
no,
everything
go
that's
on.
in our garden, whether it be the wasps. Like we had a customer yesterday, and she was saying something is eating her aspidistra, which is known as the cast iron plant. So I'm thinking, my
Right.
goodness gracious me, there's nothing on earth that really would like to eat an aspidistra. And she says that she can only see the veins and none of the flesh between the veins of the leaves are actually left. She said, maybe it's a spider. I said, no, spiders are very beneficial in a garden. You have to keep them. And so then we were trying to go through the list, and she said, well, maybe it's a caterpillar. And I was like,
Yes.
yes, but those caterpillars are going to turn into butterflies. So we have to keep them too. And so we went through the whole list. I said, maybe you just have to leave your plant and let it recover, cut off the very bad
Yes.
leaves, and your plant will recover very easily. So I think, we mustn't see things as a negative. If it's a wasp, and okay, maybe we do get stung and it's very painful, but they still, we need them for the circle of life. And that's what we have to remember about each and every organism within our garden.
Absolutely. And so that's why I say, when we're doing pest removals, we understand that some animals are pests, but sometimes people spray everything. They'll kill everything, and not everything is a pest. Some animals actually are protecting us or giving us a sign of something. For instance, if I see ants, I think, oh, are there aphids? What's going on? So they come to bring us little messages. They come to tell us, something is going on with your plant. And it's interesting what you said also about spring, and definitely spring being a time of rejuvenation. And I've spoken to my colleagues at the Radio Al Ansar, and we've said, this week is really a spring week. And it's a time where we talk about topics of rejuvenation. And in order to grow again, we often have to release the old. And we go through winter and we see the leaves that, there's no leaves on the trees and everything is bare and everything is nude. But we forget the beauty of that is that it's clearing out the old in order to move into the new. And in our lives, Cary, to get a little bit philosophical at the moment, we do tend to want to embrace the new, but we
Yeah.
struggle to release, right? To let go. And
Well,
sometimes you have to let go before you move on. Sometimes you move on and then you let go. But sure enough, everything is a season. And so if you, dear listener, are going through any kind of difficulty at this moment, if you're going through any hardship, please know that it is a season. Inshallah, the cycles will turn, the sun will come out again. The sun will come out tomorrow.
take the
And it
bottom,
is
don't
up
like tomorrow.
tomorrow. The sun will come out again. So tell us, in spring, I know that in Japan, it is the time of the cherry blossoms and it's the most magnificent thing.
Yeah.
But what's happening in South Africa in the springtime? What are the plants we should be looking out for?
So we're actually going to look for the different blossoms that are in the trees. We don't have the cherries, unfortunately,
Yeah.
but we have to look at other things like the nectarine blossoms are all out. As I said, the peaches. Some of our plums, they blossomed a little bit early, so they've already got tiny little fruits on them, especially the wild plums. I managed to get some of the rootstock of the wild plums. So if you're looking at your orchards, those fruits and blossoms are already out. And so I think that's quite an exciting time for us in terms of what your trees are doing. But then when we were talking about Arbor Week and we have our indigenous trees, always one of the first signs I learned when we went into,
Yes.
the game reserve was we would look for the wild pear. And the wild pear was a sign of spring coming. So I was in Nelspruit about 2 weeks ago, and the wild pear was in flower. And then when I've looked around Johannesburg, we haven't really seen them. And then last night when I went to one of our businesses, then actually the wild pear there, the Dombea, was in flower as well. So I was like, oh, fantastic. This is really working. So there are quite a lot of
I used to find,
flowering.
yes, yes, there are a lot of flowers coming out. I did not know about the wild pear. That's fascinating. For me, being in Joburg at the time, I always looked out for the plum trees. When the plum trees started to flower, that felt to me like springtime. They almost started to blossom just before the apricot trees. And so, is this a good time to be planting fruit trees? Is the question.
I think any time is a good time to plant a tree. So the plants are getting blossoms and fruit. So as long as you're planting them and you plant them with good nutrients in the soil, so you're putting good compost, if it's a good fertilizer or if you've made your own fertilizer, one of my favorite things to do now when we're planting and start planting is actually to dilute a kelp-based product, and then we spray the roots with that to prevent them
Mhm.
going into shock. And then there's, I think I'm going to get the word right, phytokinins in the kelp, and that's actually helping the
Yes.
roots to regenerate correctly. And so it's, for me, it's quite a new thing. I mean, I just
Yes.
used to use always like superphosphate and bone meal and those type of phosphate related
Mhm.
products when I started planting. But now I'm thinking, actually, I'm going to start using more kelp based products or combining them
Help.
to make sure that my plants have a good start in spring because I've actually looked after their roots. So to me, it's a lovely time. There's so many fruit trees available in your
Yes.
garden centers. Go and explore.
Yes. You talk about kelp, and I just comes with a little warning, folks. It doesn't mean you can pick kelp up off the beach and then put it in your plants, because salt
True,
is
true. I
not good
never
for
thought
your plants.
it's because I don't live at the sea. I would never have imagined actually taking kelp from the sea. Oh,
Common
goodness.
sense is not all common, and people don't know. And I actually know this. The reason I'm saying it is because it's happened to somebody who contacted me once and said, what can I use? And I said, well, try some kelp based products. He says, can I use kelp liquid? Yes, you can use kelp liquid. I mean, you get the kelp liquid, is what I thought. He's going to go and get the kelp liquid, but no, he got kelp off the beach and liquidized that. And I thought, uh-oh. When I got the call to say, I've got a problem. My trees are dying. Well, what have you put in it? Kelp, like you said. No, but I don't understand. What was the dosage you used? No, I just fetched some off the beach. I was like, no, 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 you can't be doing that. Because salt. Plants do need sodium and magnesium and all of those things, but yeah, kelp. From a herbs perspective and a medicinal plants perspective, there is this tiny little herb that is regarded as a weed. And I wish that nurseries would grow and sell more of these little things that are weeds as herbs, teaching people what they are. And it is called shepherd's purse. I don't know if you know it, but shepherd's purse looks like a completely dead little plant, looks like a dandelion, and you think it's just a dandelion, and so people rip it up. And shepherd's purse shoots out this long, thin stalk with these little tiny, teeny, tiny white bell-shaped flowers along the stem. But when those flowers dry out, it relieves a seed pod in the shape of a heart. Each little seed pod is like a little heart suspended on that stalk, and we walk past these and we crush them underfoot, and we don't take care of these little shepherd's purse. And ever since I found out about shepherd's purse many years ago, I actually prayed and asked, I'd like a shepherd's purse because you can't find them in nurseries. And I don't know how, I don't know why, I don't know who the little birdie was, but some birdie dropped some seeds in my garden. And the same thing when I moved to Durban, I had no shepherd's purse. And again, I prayed. And let me tell you, I have shepherd's purse in my garden. And I think that medicinal plants kind of come to us when we're in tune with nature. But what is shepherd's purse? So before there was black pepper, Carrie, people would take the shepherd's purse pods. They literally a perfect little heart, a 3D heart, and they would dry them out and crush them like pepper and put them in their food. Now, shepherd's purse is a blood cleanser, it's an immune booster, it's a digestive, but more importantly, it's a blood stauncher. So if you cut yourself, if you have, and this happened to one of my gardeners way back when, he was mugged and the eyes were bleeding. Shepherd's purse literally stops that hemorrhage in a pinch. It just stops it like that. So it's a tea that you can drink internally, absolutely, because it's going to clean your blood. Ladies that go on Hajj, they go on Umrah, they go on pilgrimage, so they don't want to get their cycle when they're out there, can use the shepherd's purse to delay their cycle, always with medical support, of course, from your medical doctors, please, folks. This is educational purposes. But it is something that it just stops it. And it's this completely kind of ignored little plant that people just mow over. You can eat this, you can eat the pods. They taste slightly peppery without being too sharp. They make beautiful additions in salads, the flowers, the leaves, the seed pods. It's just too beautiful. Shepherd's purse. Won't you find it and won't you grow it in a pot? Because I know you have a nursery.
Yes, I'm going to chat to my brother. We're always looking for interesting herbs to try and find. So
Yes,
we'll definitely put it on our list, on our bucket list.
yes. And this is the time also when your dandelions come out.
Mm, yeah.
The dandelion flowers start to come out. And so I remember reading about an ancient herbalist from the 18th century, and she would go around and she said the way to harvest dandelion stalks is to cut the dandelion stalk at the base and only then remove the flower. You don't remove the flower and then the stalk, because once you remove the stalk at the base, there's still sap going to the flower. So then she would say you eat, I think it's 100 stalks of dandelion in order to be protected from colds and flus and that throughout the year. And if you know anything about me, you'll know that for me, dandelions are also one of the most prized things. They're collagen boosters, dandelions, Cary.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the
So many
anti-aging.
people are, yeah, I was going to say
Yes.
they're taking the synthetic collagen that you buy in a powder, and it feels very wrong in a strange way.
Well, the collagen we're getting is normally bovine collagen, sometimes it's plant based collagen, but here you have dandelion flowers that I make a beautiful dandelion flower omelette, and now is the perfect time of the year to
Oh,
do it as
wow.
spring comes in. And
Yeah.
you must taste this. Just take a few dandelion flowers, cut them up, chop them up finely. It seems a little odd to be putting them in your omelette like this because you know, they're quite fluffy, but you get your eggs, you put your dandelion flowers into it. You can add your spices, you can add your whatevers. It lends it not a floral taste at all, but a green kind of a herbal kind of a flavor. It's
Oh,
beautiful.
nice.
And you're boosting your immune system. You're helping your body to rebuild collagen. You are assisting your digestive tract. You are becoming younger because it's full of antioxidants, it's full of vitamin C, and we don't know it.
Yeah. I was going to say, I feel we might have to go into the local park because most of us within our gardens, when we see a weed, and we do know that a weed is
Yes.
only a plant in an unwanted place. So, like my black-eyed
Yes.
seasons in my garden, they became a weed, and I actually pulled them out. And every time I see them in a bag now, in the nursery or in a customer's garden, I think, oh, I love them so much. But don't put them in your own garden. You didn't like them there. So, a weed is not really something that it's a personal thing. And so why don't we grow, like you were saying, the shepherd's purse and the dandelion in pots in our herb garden or part of our actual garden to really enjoy, just like we enjoy, dianthus and gazanias and other plants that might just be there for the
Yes.
flower and the beauty, and maybe they're very good pollinators. So I think all plants have
Yes.
lots of different benefits. And it could be medicinal,
Mm.
it could be for pollinator, but just like us as humans now, we don't normally, we love to multitask. And I think our plants, the days when they could just be beautiful, or when people had gardens just for beauty, is maybe not there anymore. And we have to look further
Mm.
and look a little bit more deeper into the plant and what else can it add to our garden to make it beneficial both for us and for our environment. So that's why
Yeah.
you have to go plant in the spring.
Yes, go and plant in the spring. And you know what? Collect a dandelion flower,
Mm.
collect a dandelion plant, pardon me, if you're out in a park somewhere. But be careful not to disturb the root. And you know, of course, about dandelion coffee, right? So that is made from the root of the dandelion, which is full of antioxidants. You don't know about it. It is
No.
delicious. It is delicious. It gives you the similar energy boost to coffee while it's cleaning your blood. And all you do is you lift the dandelion right out with its root. You keep the leaves for the salad. You keep the flowers for your tea and your omelets. You eat the stalks fresh as is, and then those roots you wash them, you prop them up and put them in the oven and let them dry out. And now you use it as you would coffee. Grind it and boil your water. Make your your coffee in the percolator.
I'm going to test it next time we chat. I will let you know if I get the same fantastic high from dandelion root as I do from caffeine.
Yes, and you're going to have a wonderful kind of body healing effect as well from your dandelion. Plus, you get that collagen boost. So there you go. But all these little weeds are coming up, as you say, and I love that. Weeds are just plants that grow in unwanted places. Is that what you said?
Mm. Yes, yeah.
Yes, I love that. Absolutely.
So the other thing that's also I love
So, in
about
terms of
spring. Oh,
other flowers,
I was gonna say with,
yes,
and I'm gonna go before the flowers is just back to the veggies. Is I love the fact that in spring we get to plant all our colorful things. So we get to plant our seeds of our watermelons and our butter squashes, and we get to use maize as a, a boundary fence to keep our neighbors away because we don't normally like to talk to our neighbors, and so we get to use our vegetables, but they're colorful and crunchy and delicious vegetables like cucumbers. People can start planting cucumbers again and growing your
hmm
own tomatoes. So I think there's lots of, I always think the autumn and winter veggies for me are not the tastiest. I'm hoping you blocking your
yes,
ears. But now is the time to go, it's all about color. So whether it is like our veggies and we're going to put in some veggies and fruits, or we actually start looking at the flowers. So the flowers in the spring and the
yes.
summer, the day I want to say the daffodils, they were flowering beautifully, but also then it makes you think of the bulbs, and you have, it's a bit early still, but soon you're going to be able to start planting your dahlia bulbs. But you could start planting
Wow.
your calla lily bulbs or xanthidecias, your gladioli bulbs. Those are started in the garden centers already, which is quite
Mhm.
nice. And some of we've got new things like the zephyranthus. So I'm trying to think what its common name is. I think it's called a river lily. It used to come in pink and white.
River lilies, yes, the pink and white
Yes.
with the large, long leaves.
Yes, but quite a slim leaf. And now that
Yes,
they've even managed to get a yellow one. So I thought that
yes.
was quite exciting, something new and available. But then it's also
Mm.
the time for begonias and impatiens, as I say, dianthus, marigolds and nasturtiums.
I was I was waiting to interrupt you on marigolds because now is the time. Don't forget
Yes.
your African marigolds for the
Mm,
insects. Keep them, plant them in
yes.
the borders, plant them in the pathways, keep those insects away. And then, of course, if you're talking English marigolds, then here goes my apothecary cap again, because you need that calendula. You need that calendula for all your skin lotions and for all of your. Do you know if a child gets a runny stomach from gastro, for instance? Of course, always take the child to the doctor. But even an adult, if your tummy is runny, get some English marigold, the calendula flowers, and make a cup of tea. And it stops that diarrhea like that. Nature's Imodium.
I was going to say, I think you're always such a wealth of knowledge. I learned so much chatting from you. And I love the fact that it's actually stuff that we could use in our everyday life. And it's things that we could have in our garden. It just makes, I want to say, our lives and our garden become one. And I think that's so super important because we shouldn't separate ourselves from the environment in which we live.
That is so important what you're saying about not separating oneself from the environment that we live. But I want to go back to your previous point, and I love doing this because I love doing this show because I think that this is knowledge that we cannot lose. And if I've learned it and it does come naturally to me, it's kind of like a duty to share it with other people. But I learned so much from you as well. So let's just get that right. That's why we have you on here, because you teach us so much about plants, particularly now. If we're planting in the springtime, let's talk about companion gardening. What
Hmm.
should we put in besides those marigolds as we set up those spring gardens?
So you could also start looking at the things like your lavenders, a very good companion. You know, some of your
Mhm.
pelargoniums, like your citronella pelargoniums, people are starting to plant for, sorry, a trolley's going past. So they're going to start planting them for the mosquitoes. Because who would have
Oh,
thought the
yes,
spring has hardly sprung, and I found a mosquito in our office the other day. I was like,
yes,
no, 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 it is too early for you to be hanging around here. So I had to go and get my citronella, which I have in a pot, so citronella pelargonium, and I bring it inside in the evenings. And then I once said helps almost keep the mosquitoes away in my home or in my
yes,
bedroom. And then I take it back outside during the day so it gets the full sun that it actually requires. So you could look
yes.
at that. And I was going to say, I also love the idea, you know, rosemary, you can also plant all year round. But
Mhm.
again, it's a very, very beneficial companion plant to have in your garden. So,
Oh, don't even get me started on rosemary. Oh, my word. But Carrie, I'm going to stop you for just a moment. I'm going to take
sure.
this question. It's a question from Sins. She says, "Good morning. I have two dandelion plants in front of my house. Can I repot them?" Yes, of course you can. What you do need to do is you need to dig deep. You need to dig deep. You need to go right down to lift that root out, and then you can put them into a pot. You can put them both in the pot. Dandelions love to be crowded. They love to have friends around. So grow all your dandelions in a pot, let them grow in clumps. Then you have lots of dandelions to harvest and lots of coffee. Now back to you, Carrie. You were talking about rosemary, and just as lavender is insecticidal, rosemary is insecticidal. But
Mm.
rosemary, do you know, it's one of the essential oils that is usually safe for internal consumption. Don't go drinking rosemary essential oils willy nilly, folks. But it is one of those that normally is non toxic, especially if you have a good brand. And you can drink rosemary, it is antiviral, it's antimicrobial, which means there's no bacteria that can handle it, no fungus that can handle it, no virus that can handle it. And during the pandemics days, it was one of the things that I said to people: have a cup of rosemary tea for your coughs, your colds, your flus, as these seasonal changes comes in. And we're going into spring and people start to suffer from hay fever and all of that jazz. It's great to have that cup of rosemary tea. And it just makes you feel like you've stepped off some boat in the 1600s, and I shall make myself a cup of rosemary and dandelion tea. Throw the two in together. Always with these kinds of fresh herbs, it's a quarter cup of the fresh herb or a quarter cup of the combination of fresh herb, and then 1 cup of boiling water. Let it stand. Unless you're dealing with stinging nettle, in which you halve the amount of the plants. Very important. I had to get that in there because you're talking natural living and plants and health.
Yes, well, actually, it was so strange you say stinging nettle because I remember once, and it was a long time ago, a customer asked us about stinging nettle, and I was like, no, you're certainly not going to find it in a garden center, and it's not something that you normally keep in your garden. And then I went to a
Yes.
friend down in Cape Town, and she had stinging nettle. She'd planted up a bath, and she had stinging nettle in that. And I said, "Oh, maybe can I take some home? And I want to see if I can grow it." And I
Yes.
wrapped it in newspaper, and it flew home with me. And I just put one in, and now it pops up everywhere in my garden. I have difficulty trying to force it to stay in the pot that it's meant to stay in, but
Yes.
it does pop up everywhere. And I thought that's quite interesting for me because, as you say, when you want a herb to arrive, and even if you don't want it to arrive all over the place, it does seem to arrive somehow and make itself very at home in our gardens.
Exactly that. Stinging nettle is interesting for me in terms of pests because I'll plant my stinging nettle, and then before they go for anything, the grasshoppers will eat the stinging nettle. And that's how I know I've got grasshoppers, because stinging nettle attracts these grasshoppers to itself, not from outside, doesn't bring them in, but if there are grasshoppers around, they will eat your stinging nettle because it's really good. And coincidentally, my dog loves stinging nettle. She eats it. Now, I don't know how she does that, because those little furry bits sting. But did you know, Carrie, that if you get stung by stinging nettle, you're touching the plant or you rub against the plant and it itches for Africa, the best cure for it is, don't run and get a cream. Don't run and do anything. Cut a stalk and apply the juice of the stinging nettle. The juice of the stinging nettle is the cure for the sting of the stinging nettle. How's that for you? Hmm? Did you
That
know
is
that?
truly amazing. Actually, it feels like it's an all-in-one. So
It
it gives
is.
you, and sometimes that itchiness or the sting is actually very healing. And then, as
Oh,
you say,
I
you
don't know
get to
about
treat
that.
it afterwards. No, we had somebody who, the reason the customer was asking, and you would
Yes.
probably know better than me, it was for back pain. And so she was using it
Okay.
almost as like to, yeah, to sting and then to soothe. And
Yes,
that
because
was the purpose of it.
yeah, from that
I agree.
yeah, from that perspective, I would agree, because it's stinging, and then the body has a reaction to it, and that reaction that it gives is to try to numb that itch, and then of course it numbs that pain. But frankly, it itches. I'd much rather use castor oil.
Okay, I think I like that. I think it was before castor oil became so popular. That's why
Ah,
she was asking. But I think all these things, as we learn more about them, then we get to use them more. So at the time,
yes,
maybe stinging nettle was more of the one that people would speak about. But
yes,
this, I was going to say, now it's the same with the nasturtiums. You know how beneficial they are as companions. And I think at this time of the year, I know a lot of schools and everything do planting for spring day. So maybe go and look for nasturtium seeds because they're nice and big and easy for kids to plant. The whole plant is basically edible. It's a very good companion.
yes,
So I think it's a lovely,
yes.
lovely plant to have in your garden or in your school grounds or to just share it with others. So it's a good one too.
And it's such a beautiful flower.
Mm.
Nasturtiums tend to ramble out, but if you want to, and I've done this in my greenhouse, is I let it grow and then I gently, gently tie it up. It's not meant to climb, but if you do gently tie it up the sides, then you can create a frame with your nasturtium flowers. And of course, if you have a sore throat, I can't help myself. If you have a sore throat, grab a leaf, pop it in your mouth, and chew on it because it'll numb that sore throat. Nasturtium leaves are great in salads. They also have that peppery taste. Was another thing that was used back then when there was no pepper. 'Cause pepper was in India and folks couldn't get there. So, Malaysia and so forth. So the rest of the folks, particularly in Britain, were left with nasturtium leaves and shepherd's purse. Indeed.
But at least they had something to flavor
Yes,
their food and still have what beneficial health benefits. Yeah.
yes. Now you spoke about companion gardening and you spoke about tomatoes. And what are those three that grow together?
That's the tomato. Well, I was going to say, but now I'm going to get it muddled up because it's the tomato and the bean, and then the
Ye-
maize. Those are the
Yes,
three that always go together. Yes, I was going to say, but I also think when tomatoes and basil, they bring out the flavors
yes.
in each other. Whereas when you plant the bean, the tomato, and the maize, the maize acts as a little bit of a protection in terms of the shade, while the bean grows
Mhm.
up, and then the tomato. I'm forgetting the rest of the story.
They are companions to one another. The
Yes,
tomatoes are they benefit from all of the goodness that comes into the ground
yes.
from the previous. Well, that is from the other plants. So that is all that we have time for on our show today. I'm afraid. Yes, our spring has sprung and our show is done. But
Oh my goodness gracious! Already.
I'm a poet and I didn't know it. And so, folks, from me, Carrie, firstly, thank you so much. So
Well,
much for being on
anytime.
the show.
I
Always
love
a
chatting with
pleasure.
you.
And it was lovely talking to you again and being with you, dear listeners. We'll see you
Mm.
again next week where we're going to cross over. I'm hoping to, we actually have her booked, yes, tomorrow. I'm not going to give it away because the last time I had her on the show, it got cancelled. So you wait and see. There's a special show, and it's not for the gardening folks. It's for those who love nature and those who love wild animals.
Oh, sounds exciting.
Join us next week on Radio Alansar from myself and the entire team and Dr. Cary Goodwin, who is with
Yeah.
us, okay? Until next
Happy
week,
spring.
happy spring. And from all of us, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.